baggage and weight. Loads of it. Loads of it. We often look at whatever we're experiencing with kind of angry eyes, judging primarily ourselves, others, for the mishaps, the things that are not desired, things that are painful. And life becomes, for many of us, a struggle to keep battling it away with these things, usually involving feelings, usually involving events that produce more feelings in us. Some of these events might be emotional in nature, or some of them might actually be physical. Emotional, psychological, by the way. It really comes out in situations where we are trying to improve ourselves. That's really when it shows up, the negative aspect of things, where we kind of know what we want, but for some reason the negatives happen. Either the negatives show up in us as in the form of thoughts, tendencies, where the person pulls inward and then says to themselves, why do I keep doing this again and again? Why does this thing happen? Why do I have these recurring thoughts? Thoughts that I don't want. And of course, as the tendency usually ends up becoming is, we look for somebody to blame. That person, that being, that entity, that thing could be an actual person, yes, or even in the case of somebody like Satan or some Mara in Buddhism, or the ghosts of yesterday, somebody who has done us wrong, the system, the world, you name it. Oneself. Depending on what you've been used to, who you've been used to pointing a finger at. Sometimes it's a combination of all. But as I was saying, usually it is not something that we spend much time on, sitting, sifting through, trying to decipher, to untie this knot. Usually it's very quick, which leads us to even more dire, more intense, more negative, more hot emotional states. And then we shut down. Or we get into this shame/guilt tripping ourselves. There's no good outcome of that, because it's a blame game. You are blaming yourself, you are blaming that person for this thing that you're going through. Now, of course, this does not mean that things that happen where people are at fault doing something wrong, they shouldn't be called out. No, that's your job, to call them out. To at least let the other person know that you're not a piece of wax, piece of plaster on the wall. Or they, pulled a fast one on you type of a thing. No, we have plenty of people like that. Or that there aren't injustices around us, world situations, this and that. No, that goes without saying. However, what is taking place in the mind is this series of constant barrage of, why is this happening? I never asked for this. It is happening. In Buddhism, we have the term called sankharas. Habitual drives, I like to translate them as. Sometimes they're called mental formations. In either case, these are things that are the results of not somebody else over there, some higher being dictating them to occur. They had an author, yes. They did have a person who started it all, and that is the person you look at in the mirror, in a different life, in a different form. Have you ever seen an avalanche? Yes. They're massive. Sometimes it's an avalanche of, yes, snow, ice, that are no longer just snow and ice. They are boulders, they're mountains coming down, and they're bringing with them a lot of other stuff. Well, the ice is now turned into a rock. It can dislodge a building, poof, as if it's nothing on its way down. And sometimes they're just rubble and rocks, actual boulders that collapse because even though there's not even a tiny little bit of snow up there, nevertheless, it was too fragile of an anchor there underneath this huge boulder that now it just gave way and it collapsed, and it's coming down and it's bringing the whole mountain down with it. So I'd like you to think about that. And I'd like you to think about a person behind that boulder with their sledgehammer or heavy-duty boots that they are kicking this boulder down at the top of the mountain. And now it starts rolling. It starts making those sounds like rumbling sound. And then it starts slow motion almost coming down the mountain. And then that person starts running straight down all the way to the bottom. That is you. That little guy, that little person who was kicking the boulder down, starting the avalanche was you, the person. But you run faster than the avalanche could catch up. That the rolling mountain that's coming down could catch up. Now you end up in different lives. That's how fast you're flying through, thanks to your craving from life to life, life to life. And adding to the equation, into the mix, the fact that you forget that you were wearing those steel-toed shoes, or you were kicking with the sledgehammer, slamming against this boulder. Totally oblivious. Suddenly you're in this life and a piece of rock comes and slams you in the back of the head. Or a splinter flies off and comes and scratches your eyes, and you go and turn around to the left or right and say, why? Who dared to do that? Or you look up and you say, why God? Why Lord? Why this? Why that? Why me? Meanwhile, there's more coming. You hear the rumble, the ground shaking. There's avalanche upon avalanche upon avalanche coming at you. Of course, people will turn around and they say, well, there's this conspiracy against me by life. Life is unfair. This is unfair. That, why does this happen to me? Avalanche upon avalanche of actions. That is the sledgehammer I was referring to. That is the steel-toed shoes with which you kicked carelessly, but with intentionality. At that moment when all things were going according to your plans, no one was watching, and you saw that you could get away with this or that. doing something that is harmful, either to you, to the people around you, or to people that you didn't know about, don't care about. And now you look at the world, people are doing that. People are destroying lives. I think somebody was saying 135,000 men, women, and children and elderly have been killed in Palestine just since last October. 135,000 people have been killed, murdered. And now in Lebanon, already there's close to 1,000 people have died, thanks to the Israelis dropping bombs and this and that, you know. You look at Africa, it's never stopped. Mercenaries, people go in and kill, and there's and then you hear about it months later that there's been a massacre, there's been a genocide. Well, who's doing these things? People who are getting away with it, plain and simple. The Nazis thought that they were getting away with it for about at least 4 years, if not 6. But they were caught. They were exposed. Now, human beings have been doing a lot worse than the Nazis, by the way, since then. Why? Because they have the opportunity. The U.S. military had been doing that in Vietnam. Massacres. People dying. I've always wondered about that. And then there was the Stanford experiment in the early 70s, I think, late 60s, where they did the experiment. I forgot the name of it. The psychological experiment to basically they had two groups of actual students of Stanford who volunteered to do this experiment, which basically involved one group wearing outfits that resemble those of security guards or police, no weapons, no nothing, while the other group wore other outfits that looked like they were inmates. Nothing was barred, nothing was they weren't closed off, they weren't living in an actual jail cell, etc. And then they looked at the interactions that were taking place between these people, many of whom were actual friends in real life, in academia. And then they had to do this experiment where part of the experiment involved zapping the other person in case the other person doesn't do what they're supposed to. Authority was exercised suddenly on behalf of those, by those individuals who were in the position of a security guard. Suddenly they had a prerogative, they had an authority, they had rights to squeeze the other person. Harm was being caused, actual harm, and they were okay with that. The people who were causing it, there were actors involved too, they were making sounds, this and that, because the zapping, because the person wasn't giving the responses that they wanted. So they were increasing the voltage, at least that's what they thought. But the bad thing was their conscience was okay with doing that to their friends, to other fellow human beings, simply because they had enlisted in this, to play this part of an authority. So basically they had the right conditions to do something that they could get away with. But this is not just happening in an isolated situation. This is happening with every single individual, in your thoughts, in your mind, in your speech, in your physical actions. Every one of us gets opportunities every day, at least one, where we can make a choice between what is wholesome, skillful, what is not. At least one. And I'm being extremely conservative here. But especially we do have the opportunity to make choices in our thoughts. That's why we think we can get away with the thoughts, because no one's there with a camera to spot us thinking that thought or saying those words in our head. I'm sure in time people are going to try to figure out what that is, because that's, different secret government agencies, this and that, are trying to decipher that. They're trying to understand through the temperature changes, fluctuations, the skin tension on the face, dilations of the eyes, etc., as to what might you be thinking at that moment. And they're getting closer and closer, by the way, to figuring out what you're thinking. It's a scary thought. No pun intended there. But look at the power that we have. The conditions, when they present themselves to you, where you have the ability to choose this over that, are equivalent to either you enjoying this mountain peak to destroying it and creating an avalanche for you in lives to come. So there is nobody out there who is responsible for what you are facing. Ultimately, it is us. Us. Either because of past actions and avalanches that we've started, or the ones that we are starting now, or others are starting now too, because remember, this is an area that's a tricky area for many people studying Buddhism or thinking they know Buddhism, especially when in terms of Kamma. We're talking about Kamma. Kamma means action or karma. Many times people, I've seen them actually reverting back to this deterministic view on life, like it's already planned. In places in the world they still say, oh, it's written on your forehead, it's written in the stars, type of a thing. Well, not exactly, because if that's the case, then you remove your choice, your freedom of choice, out of the equation completely. If that was the case, there would never have been a Buddha. There would never be any enlightened person, ever. Ever. Because that would mean that there is a higher power who is deciding this and designing all this. There isn't. It's a continuum that's happening, but you are playing, I am playing, everyone is playing a role in that. So yes, there are avalanches coming down, meaning your actions, and specifically the consequences of your actions. Those are the boulders and rocks that fly off from the avalanche and hit you left and right. Sometimes even destroy the bridges upon which you're about to walk. Nobody destroyed it, actually. It was just the previous actions you've committed that you cannot trace in any way, shape, or form, at least now, as to where it started. Who was the responsible for that? Responsible person for that. So there's that part of this whole Kamma situation. The other is the actions that you are committing now, as well as the actions that others are committing as well. So it's a combination, it's a dynamic situation. It's simply not the past, and that's it, past actions. Currently, at this moment, other actions are being committed by yourself, as well as the intentional actions committed by others. And because we don't live in a vacuum, their actions also have a bearing upon us. Now, this is where a person who is noble really shines. Because let's say the other actions that the other person is committing are badly intentional actions, unwholesome. They don't have the welfare of beings, benefit of beings in the long run in mind. So it's completely akusala. We call it akusala, unwholesome, unskillful. Let's say that is the nature of the actions that others are committing in the world. And in the meantime, if you're smart enough, wise enough to look back and look at the actions of, the avalanche of wrong actions you've committed, and then there you draw a line and say, yes, I realize these are coming at me. I'm the author of those as well, as I am of the ones I'm committing now. But despite the fact that they have been committed by me, I choose to separate myself from their authorship, meaning I cannot continue on that chain of thought, that line of thought, that line of behavior, in fact. So I choose to behave differently than I have in the past. So this is where you're placing a new precedent. You are changing direction. One, changing direction from the avalanches that you're responsible for, as well as the actions of those around you who are committing wrong actions. So your choices in the actions you commit now are independent of those, are not reliant on those. Why? Because you have a better understanding of Kamma. You understand that, okay, the past actions I cannot change, my actions, but I can change my actions of today. And I cannot use your actions over there as a reason for me to carry on the same mentality of where I was when I created those avalanches. So this is where you are breaking free. One has to spend some time with this. One has to spend, because your life depends on this. Your future depends on this. Your happiness, true happiness, depends on this. But that's where most people, unfortunately, are. They look at the world that is, in their mind, treating them unfairly. Again, it could be the choices of other people involved in their life in one way or the other, but primarily it's their past actions. These two are there as a presence, as a forces, basically. But ultimately, it is the person's own choice in how you want to come out of that moment. Do you want to stick to your principles and say, no, I will not do that? Why? Because I will place myself in your shoes. I have the opportunity to stab you in the back, let's say, because I know you would do that to me. So maybe it's a tit for tat situation. But one thing's for sure, nobody's going to enjoy being stabbed in the back. Okay, I don't like to be, burglarized. I have an opportunity to steal from you, though. And I know you would steal from me if you get the chance. Sounds familiar? This is the world we live in. If I don't do it to you, you're going to do it to me. So might as well just do it the moment I get a chance. That is the world we live in. But that is the reason why this planet is going down the tubes. Because people have forgotten the value of virtue. It's not just ethics, which has become this meaningless word. Ethics, ethical. It means nothing in the world today. Virtue has to be lived. It's not a word. It's a behavior. It's based on actions. So when you look around you and you say no to that lower tendency, yes, that person might stab me in the back. Yes, they might steal from me. They might take the things that I cherish, that I've worked hard for. But you know what? I'm also going to give him the pleasure that I am seeking, the pleasure or the happiness I get from the comfort and knowing that I am safe. I like to feel safe, thank you very much. I like to know that no one's going to come and steal my stuff. I like to know that there's nobody behind me with their sword, with their knife pulled out of its scabbard, sharp knife, and ready to stab me in the back. I like to know that there's no such person behind me. Why? Because it feels good, it feels safe, I can relax. Okay, even if I don't have one, this is the tricky part, even if I don't have such a person, such a situation, I'm going to give that feeling to you, that feeling of safety. Now we're talking loving kindness. Now we are talking true empathy, true compassion, true Dhamma. How many people do you know could do that? That's not our business. Our job in this path is to make sure that we become those characters. And this way you definitely have cut yourself loose, at least to maintain the continuity of the past avalanche creating tendencies, which are the sankharas, as well as the inequities and evil-mindedness and wrong path that the world around you is pursuing. So now you're an anomaly. You don't follow the typical norms of the world. And guess what else you are? You're a happy person. You're a contented person. Because you're a safe person. Even a criminal will sit next to you and feel safe. Even a wild animal will sit next to you and feel safe. That's what they felt around the Arahants. That's what they felt definitely around Lord Buddha. Because so long as you're alive, those avalanches will come. But if you're living a purer and purer life every day, the chances of heavy duty, like big boulders hitting you are becoming less and less. And once the person dies, the avalanches finish for the first time, and for the last time they're done. No more. No matter how big of an avalanche, how many Everest mountains are coming after you, they can't come after you because you're not going anywhere anymore. You're not jumping from life to life anymore. You're not inhabiting another body anymore for it to land upon. The splinters to come at you. None. You're done. So long as you're alive in some form, you have taken birth, you have become another in a body, you're alive somewhere. That means there's a ground for it to land upon. But if there's no ground, where is it going to land? The ground here is a reference to having craving, longing, desire for re-becoming. Once that is no more, the person has become an Arahant, awakened, has experienced full Nibbana. This is the last life they will have. The misery is over. The samsaric, constant journey between life and death and sorrow and lamentation, pain, anguish, depression, sense of loss, stress, panic, worry, all that is gone. Gone, because the perpetuating furnace is over, it's done. So look at the situations you're in, the conditions that you're encountering, the circumstances, the fruits of yesterday, yesteryears, yesterlife, consequences of past, as avalanches whose author is none other than you. That's one. The other factor of life that's happening is also the conditions the other avalanches are being caused by others as well. Now, the avalanches that people cause is not going to just come at them only. The law of Kamma is so vast, it's such like a net, it's like a cobweb of a spider. It's limitless. And if you've ever touched a cobweb, or if you see a wind or breeze hitting a cobweb, you see that anywhere something moves, the cobweb, everything else on the cobweb moves as well. The vibration spreads all over the place. It's like that when action is committed. Of course, the average human mind wants to get very quick results, quick, black and white, yes and no answers. When it comes to Kamma, you can't oversimplify. There are some ways you can, like the examples I'm providing here. The Avalanche, the authorship of whom belongs to us. But as well as the actions of others, they also have a bearing on us. But the bearing does not need to become a cause for us to also reflect what they're doing and react to their behavior and do something similar, because then we are perpetuating more and more avalanches of wrong actions. Make a 90-degree turn. You can do that. Go the other way. Choose your path. If you're living in a mean world, draw a diameter around you wide enough, circumference around you big enough, where you say, that might be unsafe beyond this border, but as long as we're in this space, in this circle, there will be safety here. I will not harm. I will protect. I will care, even if no one cares. This is not living blindly or naively. Of course, when you jump with that mindset without care taking of yourself, you will burn. You will burn. But we need to be wise enough to protect ourselves and maintain our safety by understanding these principles of Kamma, that there's nobody ultimately out to get you. It's just the splinters from yesteryears and lives, actions I've committed. Then you start to have a more rested heart, more relaxed, more in tune, and then you continue doing the good work of choosing to behave with actions that are constructive, that are life-giving, that are protective, wisdom-enhancing, and liberating. That's why wisdom is important, ultimately. Not to gain information, but the knowledge, higher knowledge, is there to help us to see through all this and break free through Nibbana and end it all. Through understanding.